Okay, so we've looked at Kurt Jackson, and I finished my version of one. Well, I used some of his techniques last week to do a painting of a riverside house and things, which I've now finished. The video for that is now on the website, so you can watch that again if you want to. It is speeded up, so you should be able to get through it quite quickly instead of 4 hours, which it took me in the end to do. Um, and what we're going to do now, I thought we'd have a change of media. And I mentioned this last week, is we're going to look at some oil pastels, and we often do group oil pastel paintings at the end of a sort of a 10-week course. But obviously we do a joint sort of painting together. So we're doing these individually here today, but so some of you will have some experience working with oil pastels and things. I've actually bought some new ones because a lot of mine were getting a bit old, and I'd run out of a few different things. So I did a little bit of investigating, and you might have seen this on the website. And I didn't know that oil pastels had been around since about 1925, when a company called Sakura designed some. But then about 30 years later, Pablo Picasso, the famous Picasso, wanted a medium that he could take to different places with him as a travel medium that would also get the similar effects to oil paint. So there was a manufacturer called Centillia or something. I don't know how to say it, but he designed some oil pastels for Picasso, and so since then, or since 1925, around that time, oil pastels have been used as a material that you can easily travel with and make paintings with, which I didn't know that before, so I found that quite interesting when I looked into that. So I'm just going to do what I'm going to do today is I found a picture that I would like to work from. I've put a selection of suggested artworks that you might want to try out as well for your painting today with the oil pastels. There's a range of artists. There's some newer ones. I'm going to be working from a newer artist today. I'm going to do a few techniques to sort of just give you a feel of what they're like, and perhaps you want to try those out as well if you haven't used oil pastels before. If you've got chalk pastels and you prefer to use those because you've already got them, then by all means use those as well. There's nothing wrong with trying out this. It's a little bit different obviously to oil pastels, but you should still be able to get some pretty good effects with those. But I'm going to be using the oil pastels today. All right, so I'm going to show you now what I've got as far as pictures go. So you'll be familiar with this sort of thing here. This is a Van Gogh painting. And obviously Van Gogh used oil paints back in the day, but you can reproduce things like this very easily. And we've done this previously in classes where we've done sort of a group oil pastel painting together. But the nice thing about this work is that you've got these wonderful brush strokes or dashes that create this sense of movement in Van Gogh's beautiful artworks. So the way that the grasses kind of overlap each other and look like they're moving or growing is really quite inspirational. The nice thing about oil pastels, when you use those, the lovely thing is that you've got all the colours there. You can mix them as well, and they're very immediate as well. And obviously it's a dry medium, which means you can just pick up, a bit like colour pencils, you can just pick up the material and you can just get on with it really, rather than having to spend a lot more time mixing the colours. And as I said to you earlier, they're brilliant because you can take them anywhere. And in fact, if you're coming on one of the summer outings that we're doing at Castle Ashby or at Elton Hall, you could bring along oil pastels instead of colour pencils if you wanted to, obviously because they're quite portable. So the next one I want to show you is the water lilies, and I mentioned Monet last week. So this is obviously one of his famous paintings that he did when he was much older. He used to sit in his garden, and there's lots of stories. I think we've talked about it before, about him not being able to see properly. I think he had cataracts on his eyes or something like that, but he just carried on going, observing the effects of obviously the water and reflections, but also the way that light interacts with things, particularly the water and the lilies, the lily pads and so forth on there. So another really nice one, and there's obviously a very there's quite a difference between this and Van Gogh, in that you've got much more of this kind of painterly blending in the artwork. So if you're interested in more how the oil pastels blend, this is probably a good one, or this is a good artist to go for. As you can see, these blues especially are very blended, but then you've got the lovely contrast of these arcing sort of shapes for the lily pads, and then the bright white on the surface there, and a little bit of contrasting red and the ripples on the surface of the water. So that's quite a nice varied mark making one to experiment with, and that's on the website as well if you want to find that. But obviously you'll find tons of those on the internet as well. Now the other artist I've got here is Erin Hansen, and we've looked at Erin Hansen together previously. If you remember, I painted like a cactusy one previously, didn't I? Let me just unlock that. There we go. So yeah, I painted an Erin Hansen before, and I used sort of a yellowy brownie color underneath, and then painted back over the top. So that's pretty much the way I'm going to work today. I've got a background painted on the surface of my paper already, so you'll get bits of the orange coming back through. But as you're probably aware, Impressionists are interested in color and light and the effects of that and how to show that in a painting. So you've got these beautiful purpley blue and pink shadows down here on the surface of the road, and then you've got these little bits of white light or bright light towards the back of the picture, which together with a path leads you into the background. So a really nice painting to work from again, and there's hundreds of her work on the website as well that you can look at. Now the one that I'm going to be working from is from an artist I've not seen before, called Eleanor Georgieva. I think that might be how you say it. And I like this one because I love these lovely blues and bright greens and the mark making as well, and there's a bit of blending going on in the picture too, so it's kind of a little bit of a crossover. It looks a bit like a Van Gogh in that we've got all these lovely brush strokes, but there's a little bit more blending perhaps going on with some of the colors when they're in close proximity to each other. But I thought that might be quite nice to explore. And because I'm using an orangey background, and we've got little touches of orange in there as well, and these lovely pinks, of course, I thought I would go for this one today. But there's plenty to choose from on the website, or even online if you're inclined to look that way. Okay, so I'm going to show you my oil pastels. So the brand that I usually use, or I've used in the past quite a lot, are these. I've used some of the ones that they use at school as well. But the difference really between the different brands is the ones that are a little bit cheaper tend to be more kind of a little bit more waxy and a bit harder as well. So they're quite good because they're harder for doing more detailed sort of lines and things like that. They still blend and everything like other oil pastels, but they're because they're a bit harder, they're quite nice for those extra details and things like that. So this set I think was about, I think it was about £6 or £7. So it's, well, not too expensive, but a lovely range of colours there as well. And there's 50 in that pack there. This one has got a similar amount of colours in, but I had a look at them last night, and this is it was what I expected actually. So these are a Chinese make called Paul Rubens, and there's 48 colours in here as well. And the reason I've got so many of them is because I teach everybody, so I've got a good supply of colours now for people to try out when we all get together again sometime. But these ones, I looked at them last night. I was suspicious because it was a bit hot and I was wondering if they were melting, you know, but these ones are very soft. In fact, if I just press my finger on them, I'll just zoom in a little bit. See if I can get focused. There we go. And if I just press my finger on them, they're so soft, these, that you can, they almost turn into paint when you touch them. So they're super soft and will be brilliant for applying multiple layers of color on the picture when we come to do that later. So you get these different grades of oil pastels that you can order. There's the ones, the manufacturer that I mentioned earlier, the Centennial, I'm not sure how you say that again, but those ones, they're really expensive. So I imagine those are probably got even more, these are high pigment, got a lot of pigment in, but those ones I'd imagine are really really different, but who knows. So I've gone for these ones, which were about £27 altogether, so I thought I'd try something a bit different out today. Okay, so I'll just show you a couple. I'm not going to spend ages showing you loads of techniques, but I will show you a few. So the first couple I'll show you are blending. So we've got some white and perhaps a little bit of this red just here.
I'm sorry, what type of paper do you use?
Right, so this sheet of paper is just normal cartridge paper. What I'm going to use to do my picture on is some of the watercolour paper that I bought earlier in the year when we were doing watercolours. So I'm using something a bit thicker here, purely because there's a little bit of texture on the paper as well. But I don't, to be honest, I don't think it matters too much. If you haven't got anything really thick and you've only got thin paper, I think it'll be absolutely fine. Okay, so use whatever you've got, but if you've got something thicker, it's just a little bit more pleasant to work on, I think. Okay, so I'm going to, now you can practice this if you want to. So I'm going to start off by applying, oh, it's lovely, nice and soft. So I'm going to apply, I'll come in a bit closer so you can see. There we go. It's a little bit dark. Let me just see if I can get the light on it a bit more. There we go. So I'm just going to apply the oil pastel. So it's very much like shading. And I'm just going to release the pressure as I go out, like that. And then I'll grab my white, start heavy on this side, and then I can go around in a circular motion. These are really soft actually, these Paul Rubens ones. Go around in a circular motion and I can blend those colours into each other. I can come back in again like that. So you get a nice blend. Let's see what else I've got here. So you can also do that as a light pressure blend, so you can use multiple colours. So I'll get another colour in a second. So you can do a light, that was more of a heavy pressure blend. So this one obviously is a little bit more grainy. And then let's Let's get another colour. Get an orange. And then you can use the other one lightly and blend it like that too. So you can do a blend like that. And another nice one, you can also do a stippling technique. So you can just bring it on screen, otherwise you won't be able to see what I'm doing. Okay. So you can do stippling. So a famous artist called George Seurat did this sort of technique a lot, but with paint. So then you can bring in your second colour, and you'll find that those two colours, if you overlap them, now start to mix a little bit like if you were using paint, but obviously with more of a dry technique on there.
Really, the middle
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
the texture that you've got there, is that purely based on the paper that you've got there?
Yes. Well, this actually is really smooth paper, but if I was to use a little bit of, let's try it on watercolor paper. So if I was to do it on here, you'd probably get a different texture.
Okay.
If you can see that. Yeah, so you get more, you know, if the paper's got a texture, you'll pick up that texture, but if you press heavily, you can build into it and it'll kind of disappear a little bit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, stippling with multiple colors. We'll also blend those together. And then if I go over and do, you can also do this. So this is where we're getting into the area of Van Gogh. So you can use more lineal brush strokes. I say brush strokes, but you can create that effect with these. And then I could bring in perhaps a little bit of the white on top. And you'll see how some of the colours, I think getting a bit closer. See how the white moves those colours around a little bit as well. So we've got quite a diverse way of working, and that looks really painterly actually. So the difference between the Pentel ones and the Rubens ones are that you'll get more of a painterly effect with those on there. So just experiment and see what you've got there as far as your oil pastels go. The other one that I've always liked is scumbling as well, which is more kind of loose mark making. Bring that up here. So again, it's a little bit similar to what I was just doing. And then I think a bit of blue in there. Wow, these are really soft. There we go. Looking quite similar there. Okay, so oh, and the other one I wanted to show you is called Sgraffito, which some of you will have heard of as well. So this is where you can put a couple of colours down like this. So I've got two colours on top of each other, and then you can use a sharp implement. So I'm just grabbing something that I've got in front of me here. So I've got this like screwdriver thing, and you can, if you put two colours down, you can draw into them and create marks or designs. So I'm just imagining perhaps a little bit of grass here. So again, layering those colours on top of each other, you can then scratch them away. And the other thing that you could do is you can use a scalpel blade and use the side of it and scrape whole areas away like this as well. So a little bit like paint really, in that it's very flexible and a lot of fun to work with because of the immediacy of the material. Okay, so there's a few ideas on how you can use the oil pastels. So as I mentioned earlier, what I'm doing is I'm working over I've used acrylic paint to put down a surface first of all of colour. So this is just using a flat brush, which is like this. Just get it. So this is a flat-ended brush that I've used to make the surface of this reasonably flat. In other words, there's no gradation in the colour or lightened hue, it's just all quite even. And then I'm going to use the picture that I showed you earlier, which I've now probably put down somewhere and can't find. There it is. So I'm going to draw the basic shapes of this picture. Obviously it's quite a complex image. I'll just make it a bit bigger over here. Look, it's quite complex in that there's loads of different marks, but that's the fun bit. The bit that I need to start off with is just get the basic structure of the picture. So I can see down at the bottom here I've got this lovely green, and then just above that I've got the blue area, and I've got these green patches as you go further into the back, and I've got what looks like a path and another tree in the background, and obviously this large tree in the foreground. And I can do everything from blending, stippling, scumbling. I could even add a bit of sgraffito in if I wanted to. There's not much sgraffito in this, but you can see how the marks have all been stippled and layered on top of each other. So there's an opportunity to have a lot of fun painting this with the oil pastels and things as well. Okay, so that's where I'm going with that. Now I will, if anyone's interested, I will probably divide it into 4 like I normally do. Make sure that I'm working on a square area of my paper so that I get the same proportions and so forth of this. I'm going to do it a little bit bigger than the image that I've got here as well. Okay, so that's where we're at with this. How does that sound, everybody?
Do you recommend that we all put down an acrylic base?
Well, I'm doing it because what I want to do is I want some of these orangey bits that are in the picture to come through from the background. And I did this before with the Erin Hansen painting that I did. I think that this is just purely lots of layered up colour. So what you end up doing is filling those areas in with lots of colour if you haven't got the background in. It's not necessary at all. I've done it plenty of times without, but I'm kind of getting this warmth coming from here, from the yellow, coming through the picture, hopefully, when I've laid the oil pastels on top. So if you want to do it and you think, oh, that would be interesting to see how that works, then choose a colour. Perhaps this is mostly a blue picture here, so I've chosen an almost opposite, well, it is an opposite colour, which is the orange. I've chosen an orange to contrast these blues so that when I put the colours on top, I can see them really distinctly and really clearly on top of the orange, if you see what I mean. So it's a bit like when we've used do we use well, we've done darker backgrounds, haven't we, with I think it was with the charcoal. We did a darker background and then we worked back over the top of that so that we could see the whites and so forth with the chalks.
I've chosen that first picture that you showed.
Oh, what, on the wall?
That one. The Van Gogh.
Oh, the Van Gogh, yeah. Yeah.
So if I did do a background,
yeah,
just thinking what colour I'd choose.
Yeah, so yeah, so you could probably go for, let's have a look. Let's see if I can, just trying to think what I would do. I might be tempted to split it into 2.
Good.
Yeah, yeah, and do the top half with a darker colour, a darker blue, and the bottom half with like a green. Yeah, like a a mid-range green, and then you can work back over with the blues on top and the greens on top, can't you, and really bring it out like highlights and stuff. Does that sound?
Yep, that sounds
Yeah,
fine. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. But you know, it's interesting just to see what happens. I mean, if you tried it with a different color, like a red, you'd get a slightly different result, wouldn't you? So but yeah, do that, because that's a safe bet actually, you know, going for those sorts of colors, because it's already part of the picture anyway. Okay.
Jimmy, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely. Yep.
I've got ordinary pastel paper, quite
Yeah.
a good one.
Yeah.
Can I use that?
What, like a chalk pastel paper, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I think it should be okay, because one of the main problems when using paint, obviously, is it makes the paper go all ripply, doesn't it, and things. Yeah, it distorts or warps the paper. So because we're using a dry medium, you should be okay.
Did you use alcohol?
I'm not going to use any alcohol today. No, but you can, if you want the paint to, if you want the oil pastels to turn into more of now, a couple of other little things that you might want to try out is, and I'll zoom in a little bit closer, you could make a stencil as well. If you want to make a straight edge or a line like this one just here, you can get a piece of, and this is cartridge paper, you can get a piece of cartridge paper and you could cut a shape or a line from it. So I'll just cut out, actually I'll do a wiggly line, just see if I can do that. So I'm just using a scalpel blade here. So I'm just cutting that little detail out of there, and I've already cut a couple of lines out. And you can use this stencil if you've got a hard edge or you want a nice crisp edge. You can use a piece of paper like this, so you can draw, in a sense, draw a line. So I'll just get another colour. This is my blue, and then basically just go over the top of it like that, and do the same on my wavy line. See if I can do that one too. So if you want a nice straight or specific shape, then you get these lovely crisp edges, just like that, just there. So I've used a bit of blue there on that one if you can't see the colour very well. So you can make your own stencils. You can actually buy little stencil kits and things like that from places like Hobbycraft, which if they're thin enough will work really nicely as well. And then equally, if you're working from a photo, which most of us are, I've got here we've got what was the name again? I forgot. Well, names always go out of my head when I need to say them, but I've got this painting here anyway, and you could do the same thing by cutting out part of your photograph and then using that as a stencil. So I'm using I've cut out part of a tree here, and I'm going, obviously you won't be able to see your photo anymore because you've partially gone over some of it, but you can do it a bit more carefully than what I'm doing here, and then you can peel that away and you've got a nice crisp shape of your tree. Which,
brilliant.
Yeah, which is sometimes a little bit difficult to achieve when you've got these lovely soft oil pastels, but it's a lovely way of doing it. So you might want, if you're going to do this, you might want to print off another copy of whatever you're working from to help you achieve that sort of thing. And I suspect that a few of you have struggled with the straight edges and things on there. So that's just another approach to doing it that you might want to try out today. Okay, so there's a few things for you to try out. Now the other little thing I thought you might want to see is you can also use tracing paper, and basically what you can do is put down a little, I'm using the harder oil pastels here just for this bit. You can put your oil pastel on the tracing paper, and then you could get a pencil or a pen and draw smaller lines if you want smaller details, and then you'll get very nice fine oil pastel marks on your paper. So use a bit of tracing paper. I suppose you could use baking paper or something like that as well. Put the oil pastel on one side and then transfer it onto the paper like that. So another really nice little technique you could use. The other one is, if you've got, what you can do is prepare a background and then put white. So I've got quite a dark background on here. So you can put some white oil pastel on the back of your whole photo. Get black and white version of the photo if you wanted to. And then turn it over and you could draw out the outlines of your whole image by just going over the oil pastel, and it'll transfer onto the page as well. So then you've got the whole of your image outlined on your sheet of paper, ready to sort of rock and roll with the oil pastels. So that's another a couple of little things you could do. So this is just a normal piece of paper that I put the oil pastel onto and then transferred. That one I just did there was with the really soft Paul Rubens oil pastel, but the harder, cheaper oil pastels will probably do that a little bit better, purely because it's not as soft and won't transfer as easily without a bit of pressure, and you'll get a finer line as well. So a few things for you to try out there with your oil pastels today. A couple of little experiments and techniques. Okay, does anyone have any questions before we progress and continue?
I think so.
No? All right.
Jamie, when you do this sort of thing,
Yeah. Hang on.
do you just
What, this sort of thing, or specifically your work? Yeah.
Do these squiggles. Do I put white all underneath and then put squiggles on top, or do I blend it in as I'm doing it?
I think it would work quite well either way, but what I would probably do is work in with patches of colour first, you know, and then start to work back into the lines. But a couple of people last week just literally built the whole thing up with lots of small lines of pastel as well.
So if I want a sharp edge, do I shave my pastel?
Yeah.
Shave it down.
The Pentel ones are, and I found this last week, are a little bit better for doing a nice sharp edge. So these oil pastels here, the Pentel ones, are quite nice. They're still quite well got a lot of pigment in them, because they're not they're not like super cheap ones or anything. So you'll still get the pastel color coming through, but you can also draw with them with a bit more of a precise line without it melting down.
You can make them into like a sharp point, can you?
Yeah. In fact, what you can also do is, you could use a knife or something and just cut an edge off of it if you wanted to. And often what I've done in the past is snap them. Just snap a bit off, so you've got a sharper edge again. So there's lots of different things and approaches you can do to get that edge and things like that. The other things and approaches you can do to get that edge and things like that.
All right, okay, sorry to interrupt there, but we're going to the beginning of the painting from the first of 2 weeks doing this piece. So first thing I did before this was I created a sort of a background for it using acrylic paint. The reason for that being is I like the idea of having some of the orange showing through, but also having a kind of a tone to work over the top of with some of the opposite colours, such as the blues and the greens. So as you can see here, I've divided the picture into 4 parts, and I keep folding it and unfolding it to just to focus on the shapes in particular parts of the image. And then we start to apply layers of the oil pastel to create the texture down there in the foreground of this picture. So it's a case now of using dashes of colour layered on top of each other, particularly blues, as you can see at the moment, because well, I noticed the blues, I suppose, first of all in the image. The dashes are all heading in kind of an angle from the bottom right up towards the left hand side of the picture, so they're angled in that direction to give the grass this sense of kind of unity and movement across the bottom of the picture, and also I guess to draw the eye in a certain direction, which there is a path towards the back of the picture, which we can be drawn to in this painting as well. So you've got obviously the foreground, you've got these grassy bits, and then up towards the right hand side we've got this beautiful tree which kind of frames the pathway area towards the back. So you've almost got this golden like this spiral sort of shape coming from the bottom left grassy area, going around the shape of that curving tree and into the center, which is a brilliant way of creating a really pleasing composition. So you can see me here building up the layers of oil pastel. I did start with the Pentel just a few minutes ago, but I've switched now to the thicker Paul Rubens oil pastels, which are Chinese made. What I did find as I used all of these is that some of them were lovely, absolutely gorgeous, and you could put them on top of each other very easily by applying a little bit of pressure, whereas some of the other colours were much more kind of waxy and didn't seem to layer on top of each other as well. So I suspect that the Centillier ones will be obviously better quality, but you'll probably be able to do that with all of the different pastels. I've not tried out those ones, but certainly will do sometime in the future when I use oil pastels again. So a lot of this work is very much like Van Gogh in a way. So it's quite nice to explore this technique and how somebody else has painted it with this impressionistic style, and these lovely marks as well, dashes and dots and so forth. So one thing that's useful to have while you're working here is some kitchen towel, or I'm told baby wipes are very good as well for cleaning your oil pastels, because they do get, especially these soft soft oil pastels, they do get rather kind of mushy and messy, and indeed my hands by the end of both sessions were very dirty. So baby wipes, brilliant for cleaning. And but I found as well that a paper towel works quite well for cleaning them off quickly. You'll notice though that it's very easy to break these oil pastels. You can still use them if you break them, of course, but when you start warming them up or you apply a bit of pressure with your fingers, they can snap quite easily. But it was great fun, really looking closely at Elena Georgieva's work. I see how she built up these layers. I don't think, as far as I'm aware, she did oil pastel for this, but I've certainly interpreted it with oil pastels for this exercise. So one of my favourite things to do is working on the branches, in between the branches on the tree, because you get this is where you can add significant contrast between the colours and the tones in the painting and really start to pick out some distinctive detail, which is why I went, after in the foreground I went for the tree, because you've got a really clear marker, if you like, as to the composition. Like I said earlier, the tree does frame the background. The branches arc around the path towards the back, so it gives a nice kind of frame for the composition, and the marks in the foreground lead you towards that area. There was a little tree trunk which I've just put in there on the left hand side, which is also a little bit of a marker for the background. It gives you a sense of scale as well, and that there's a pathway just in front of that as well, which has slightly different mark making in it, which also gives a suggestion of a pathway going past this tree in the foreground. So once I'd put in some of the darker marks around the bottom of the tree, I noticed there were these kind of contrasting lighter areas in front there, which almost look like they're hovering. So that suggests something like seed pods or flowers in front of the dark area. So that kind of gives it a little bit more depth and things as well in the painting. And I do call this a painting because using these oil pastels is very much like using sticks of soft paint, like cream. You'll have heard perhaps oil pastels being described as quite creamy and things as well. But certainly this was so yummy to work with. Having not worked with these kind of soft oil pastels before, it was a bit of a joy really. And the nice thing about oil pastels, which I may have said earlier, is that they are so immediate and so much fun to work with. So I was just explaining there that you can use a piece of paper to get a nice crisp edge when you're working. I didn't need too much of that on this picture. Because we've got these lots of dashes and marks and very painterly strokes on here, and no houses or buildings or straight edges can be seen. But yeah, you can use a piece of paper. You could cut a shape out of a piece of paper and make a tree if you wanted a precise shape and things. Or you could use the edge of a piece of paper to make a straight line in any particular area as well. So it's making a stencil is a brilliant way to get that kind of detail in as well. So this is the second part really of me working on this picture. So I was doing a lot more stippling or smaller dots towards the back, because we've got a different texture on those trees towards the back. There's more leaves and things like that. And also you want smaller marks towards the back and larger marks towards the foreground, so you create this illusion of space between the different areas in the picture. And you can see that working on here now. I do move the camera around quite a bit in this, purely just to get in a bit closer and things like that as well. Now at different stages during making this picture, what I was doing, switching between the cheaper, harder Pentel pastels to occasionally make much sharper and smaller, precise lines and dashes and things in the picture. The other thing about the Pentel is they are so hard, they cut right through the soft oil pastels, so it enables you to manipulate the colours a bit more. And sometimes you can use like a harder pastel to help blend two softer colours from the Paul Ribbon set together. So you can do quite a bit. There I was just scratching out some colour with my scalpel blade as well. So the pictures come together really quite well now. You can see there's a bit more distinction between the dark and light areas. Here I was explaining that you can also use white spirit to mix paint with, and what I used to do when I've used oil pastels to paint with before and white spirit, I would put some paint or some oil pastel on a piece of paper, then mix the colours with white spirit on there. So there's lots of flexible ways of working with it. You can also use white spirit and then paint it on the oil pastel itself, and then brush straight onto your piece too. The other thing is, of course, white spirit is a bit stinky. And if you round it too long, it can make you a bit drowsy or a bit dizzy, so you need to be aware of that. But you can buy white spirit that has none of these toxic sort of smells, so that's worth trying out. Anyway, that was a great picture to do, lots of fun, and it was really interesting seeing all those colours layer. Thank you.